History Class 10 Chapter 2 Video 2. In the previous video, we saw how the sense of nationalism was growing in India. It was fueled by the strict British laws, the Rowlatt Act, and the atrocities such as massacre at the Jallianwala Bagh in Amritsar in 1919. In response to all this, Mahatma Gandhi called for a movement of non-cooperation with the British. In this video, we will be taking a look at the various forms that the non-cooperation movement took. The non-cooperation Khilafat movement was launched in January 1921 at the start of what Indians were hoping would be a promising decade for their future. Gandhi propagated using non-violent means of civil disobedience known as satyagraha to protest against the oppressive British measures such as Rowlatt Act. The ultimate goal was to attain Swaraj or home rule. The movement began in full steam. It took root in the cities, villages, plantations, and even in remote hilly regions. But look at the different forms it took. By the end of the decade, some places in India witnessed peaceful incident of satyagraha, with the poor achieving to a large extent their demands and wishes. At the other extreme, the movement escalated into a revolutionary acts, guerrilla warfare, and hundreds were killed. Why this extreme difference? Was the call of Swaraj not common to all? The answer is that the various social groups participated in this movement, and each social group had its own specific aspiration. Yes, all of them responded to the call of Swaraj, but the term Swaraj meant different things to different people. Before we examine the different forms, let's look at the new leader rising on the scene. His name was Jawaharlal Nehru. Jawaharlal Nehru was the son of Motilal Nehru, who was a wealthy barrister and who became the president of Indian National Congress twice. Jawaharlal Nehru, like his father, studied law in England. He returned to India in 1912, just 3 years before Gandhiji arrived in India from South Africa. The destinies of these two men would be intricately intertwined in the years to come as India struggled for independence. Nehru was actually deeply influenced by Gandhi, starting with the ideology of non-cooperation. The movement of non-cooperation started in the cities and spread to rural India. Let's talk about the towns and the cities first. In the cities, the movement started with the participation of the middle class. Thousands of students left government-controlled schools and colleges. Teachers, even headmasters, resigned. So much so that even lawyers gave up their legal practices. The council elections were boycotted in most of the provinces except Madras. Here in Madras, the Justice Party felt differently. The Justice Party was the party of non-Brahmins. The party felt that entering the council was one of the ways of gaining some power. Power, as they felt, is something that usually only Brahmins had access to. Overall, the effect of non-cooperation on the economic front were more dramatic. Foreign goods were boycotted, liquor shops were picketed. And as for the foreign cloth, it was burnt on the huge bonfires. This had an effect on the imports of the cloth. Between 1921 and 1922, in a matter of just 1 year, the import of foreign cloth became half, and its value dropped substantially from 102 crores to 57 crores. The boycott movement spread. People began discarding imported clothes and wearing only Indian ones. Hence, the production of Indian textile mills and handlooms went up. Indeed, trade as a whole was affected. In many places, merchants and traders refused to trade in foreign goods or, or even finance foreign trade. But the truth is that this movement in the city gradually slowed down. It slowed down for a variety of reasons. Khadi cloth was often more expensive than mass produced meal cloth, and poor people could not afford to buy it. How then could they boycott meal cloth for too long? Similarly, the boycott of British institutions posed a problem. You see, for the movement to be successful, there had to be a good alternative for British institutions. People had to be given a replacement, a choice for schools, colleges, etc. Alternative Indian institutions had to be put in place so that they could be used instead of British ones. But these were slow to come up, so students and teachers began to trickle back to government schools and colleges. Lawyers too went back to work in government courts. In other places, the movement was marked by violence. The town of Chauri Chaura, which is located in the Uttar Pradesh Gorakhpur district, this town was the scene of a violent incident in 1922 when a sizable group of pageants set fire a police station, killing 22 officers. Mahatma Gandhi halted the non-cooperation movement as a result of this incident. Now, look at what kind of rebellion was there in the countryside. The non-cooperation movement that had started in the cities spread to countryside. Peasants, tribal, who had struggled and suffered in the years after World War I, joined this movement in the hope of a better life and a better future for themselves and their children. Let's speak about Awadh. Awadh is a historical region in what is now in the northeastern part of the Uttar Pradesh. In Awadh, the leader of the pageants was a sannyasi. His name was Baba Ramchandra. He had lived for several years in a faraway Fiji, an island in the South Pacific Ocean. He had worked in Fiji as an indentured laborer, means he was a contract laborer, and over time put a spotlight on the grievances of the contract laborers there. When he returned to India, he started working for the rights of the peasants here too. In 1919, he led the first peasant protest against the landlords in the area called Awadh. The movement in Awadh was against landlords and the talukdars. These talukdars and landlords demanded very high rents from the peasants, among other things. Peasants had to do begar on the farms of the landlords. Do you know what begar is? Begar is a labor that villagers were forced to do without any payment. You can imagine the situation. You can imagine what kind of anger these peasants had that time. They were being forced to work and not being paid for their work. Moreover, The landlords made sure to regularly evict the farmers and their tenants. This way, the farmers could claim no rights over their leased land, means whatever land were given to them by the landlords. So they were constantly being evicted from those lands so that they could not claim those lands. It was a dire situation indeed for the poor farmers and their families. The peasant movement demanded reduction of revenues, abolition of begar, and social boycott of the oppressive landlords. Panchayats began to take a stand. In many places, Nai Dhobi Bandhs were organized by panchayats to deprive the landlords of their services of barbers and washermen. In June 1920, Jawaharlal Nehru began going around the villages in Awadh, talking to the villagers and trying to understand their grievances. By October, the Awadh Kisan Sabha was set up and headed by Nehru, Baba Ramchandra, and a few others. So grieved were the villagers that within a month over 300 branches of Awadh Kisan Sabha had been set up in the villages around the region. The non-cooperation movement had begun in 1921. The effort of the Congress was to integrate the Awadh peasant struggle into a wider struggle. But things took a turn. The peasant movement developed in forms that the Congress leadership was unhappy with. As the movement spread, the houses of talukdars and the merchants were attacked, bazaars were looted, and the grain hoards were taken over. In fact, the name of Mahatma Gandhi was being used to sanction all actions and aspirations. In many places, local leaders told the peasants that Gandhiji had declared that no taxes were to be paid and that land was to be redistributed among the poor. So, the peasants became misguided. They started going their own way. They were not following the guidance given by the Mahatma Gandhi or Jawaharlal Nehru. So the Congress party was very much unhappy with them. These tribal peasants interpreted the message of Mahatma Gandhi and the idea of Swaraj in yet another way. Let's turn to take a look at what was happening in another part of India, in what is known as the Goodem Hills of Andhra Pradesh. In those areas, protest against British rule took on yet another form, that was guerrilla warfare. A militant guerrilla movement spread in the early 1920s. This definitely was not a form of a struggle that Congress could approve of. But there was a reason why the people were so enraged by colonial rule. Here, as in other forest regions, the government had closed large forest areas, preventing villagers from entering the forest to graze their cattle and to collect firewood and fruits. The hill people were furious. Not only were their livelihoods affected, but they also felt that their traditional rights were being denied. Here too, the government began forcing them to contribute begar for road building. That's when the hill people revolted. The person who rose to lead them was an interesting figure. His name was Alluri Sitaram Raju. Alluri Sitaram Raju claimed that he had a variety of special powers. He could make correct astrological predictions. He could heal people and he could survive even bullet shots. He captivated the imagination and emotions of the people of the region. The rebels proclaimed that he was the incarnation of God. Raju talked of the greatness of Mahatma Gandhi. He said he was inspired by the non-cooperation movement and persuaded people to wear khadi and give up drinking. But at the same time, he asserted that India could be liberated only by the use of force, not non-violence. His words greatly influenced people. The Goodem rebels attacked police station, attempted to kill British officials, and carried on with guerrilla warfare for achieving Swaraj. Finally, Raju was captured and executed in 1924. Over time, he became a folk hero. But were all instances violent? No, that was not the case. Let's fast forward by the few years and move to another part of India, Gujarat. Here in 1928, in a place called Bardoli, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel led the peasant movement. Known as Bardoli Satyagraha, this movement was success under his leadership. The struggle was widely publicized and generated immense sympathy in many parts of India. It was a farmers' agitation against the increased taxation of farmers by the colonial government. Its success gave rise to Sardar Patel becoming one of the main leaders of the independence movement. Plantation workers too had their own understanding of Mahatma Gandhi and the notion of Swaraj. For plantation workers in Assam, freedom meant the right to move freely in and out of the confined space in which they were enclosed, and it meant retaining a link with the village from which they had come. Under the Inland Immigration Act of 1859, plantation workers were not permitted to leave tea gardens without permission, and in fact, they were rarely given such permissions. However, they never reached their destination. Stranded on the way by a railway and steamer strike, they were caught up by the police and brutally beaten up. The visions of the movement were not defined by the Congress program. They interpreted the term Swaraj in their own ways, imagining, imagining it to be a time when all suffering and all troubles would be over. Yet, when the tribal chanted Gandhi's name and raised slogans demanding Swatantra Bharat, they were emotionally relating to an all India agitation. When they acted in the name of Mahatma Gandhi or linked their activities to that of the Congress, they were identifying with a movement that went beyond the limits of their immediate locality. What was going to happen now? The 1920s would lead into a 1930s, a time when the resolve to be free from the British rule would be strengthened. It will be a time when new visionaries will appear on the scene. What steps would leaders like Gandhi, Nehru and Patel now take? We will find out in the next video. Satyagraha took root all over India but in different forms. First, in the cities, teachers and students boycotted educational institutions. Lawyers resigned from the courts and foreign cloth was burned. In areas like Bardoli, Satyagraha was peaceful and successful, but in places like Chauri Chaura, it was marked by violence and in fact became the reason for Mahatma Gandhi to shut down the movement in 1921. At other extreme, the Goodem hills of Andhra Pradesh became the scene for guerrilla warfare. By this time, Jawaharlal Nehru became involved in Indian politics and became one of the founders of the Audh Kisan Sabha. So that was all from this video. Thank you for watching. Share the video. If you have any questions, just comment here. I'll reply to those comments. Thank you so much.